Death is a topic we often avoid talking about. But in The Death Ship, Victoria Brown faces it head on, taking a deep dive into the fate of Titanic's victims. How did they die? How did their bodies decompose? Were their bodies recovered and buried? What happened to the bodies that went down with the ship? And what of Titanic's legacy? That is straight from the inside cover of The Death Ship. And ladies and gentlemen, hello. Welcome to Titanic Legacy, a podcast that explores Titanic's lasting impact through conversations with creators, authors, artists, historians, filmmakers, musicians, entrepreneurs, video game developers, family members, and more. All people who continue to keep the Ship of Dreams legacy not just alive, but thriving as we barrel into the future. These people, through their lives, through their work, they keep the conversations going. And we love to explore it here on this show. I'm your host, Paul Carganilla, and today I'm very excited to bring you a conversation with the author of The Death Ship, Recovering the Bodies of Titanic's Dead, Victoria Brown. Victoria studied English literature and film studies, reflecting her love of storytelling and history, especially the Victorian and Edwardian eras. This according to the website of the publisher, The History Press. While at Queen's University Belfast, she was the editor of the Gown Independent newspaper, the oldest student newspaper in the United Kingdom, and has always written stories and nonfiction. She has written about art and feminist history and presented talks for feminist horror film club Ghouls on Film. I'm so excited to talk about all this stuff. But growing up in Northern Ireland, she has always been fascinated by Titanic and is a keen supporter of the death positive movement. I want to explore that, and I want to explore the book. I want to get to know her, meeting her for the first time. You and I, all together. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the show author Victoria Brown. Hello, hello.
Hi.
Now, thank you for joining us. I always start the show saying, where in the world are you from? I'm guessing from your bio that you're somewhere in Ireland?
Yes, I am in Bangor, Northern Ireland.
Very good. And wow, I have so much I want to explore with you, but I want to start with a little check-in. How are you today?
I'm good. Paul, how are
Yeah.
you?
Great, thank you. So you grew up in Northern Ireland. At what point did Titanic enter your life?
It sounds silly, but anybody from Northern Ireland will tell you it's always in the back of your mind. So much of our country is shaped by the ship's role in our history. Everywhere you go, there's Titanic related things. You're completely enamored by it, no matter what part of the country you go to. So it's hard to get away from it.
Are you in Belfast, or how close are you to that whole hub?
I'm about 20 minutes away from Belfast if
Okay.
you drive, but I unfortunately don't.
Have you been, I mean, or how many times or at what point did you first go to the Titanic Quarter up there?
I've been going there since I was a child. It's a very big thing for people here to go to it just to see the actual space where the ship was built. It's kind of a rite of passage that people here do.
Yeah, I'm sure. And they've done all that amazing work up there. I got to visit last summer and stay in the hotel there, the old Harlan and Wolff offices building, and enjoy the experience. What are your thoughts on everything that they've done there the past few years, as far as all the touristy movement and all the building that they're doing there?
I absolutely love it because for such a long time, Harlan and Wolff has always been there, but that area of the city was neglected for a long, long time. Just as I'm sure people listening know, just due to the troubles and everything surrounding the economic situation here. But in the last 10 to 15 years, that part of the city has just become such a central hub for locals, for tourists. They have the Titanic Museum there now. They have the hotel, like you said. They have the Maritime Mile, which you can walk around the entire area where the ship was built. They've really done an amazing job with it.
Yeah. And I've said it before on the show, but I encourage anyone, if it's on your bucket list, try and get there sooner rather than later. They're doing, it seems like it's just nonstop growth there. I mean, I've only been there once, but when I was there, it seemed like there was a lot of construction going on, a lot of new buildings popping up, and it feels like who knows what it's going to look like in a couple of years. It might have a whole different look.
Yeah, very much so.
I had a really magical experience. I was the morning after we had stayed in the hotel. I got up really early just to walk around the slipway and the 401 uh, area there, and it was early in the morning. Hardly anyone was out, but they had started obviously construction on whatever they're building over there. So I'm walking along that 401 slipway and just hearing ding, 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 like people building stuff and feeling the crisp air and just being there and feeling the energy. It's really, really a magical feeling. And again, I just encourage anybody, if you have the opportunity, go check it out. And it's great that, for the longest time after the Titanic tragedy, it was kind of like a scar on Belfast. And it was something that there was a lot of shame around. But in your life, did you experience that shift from the shame to the celebratory aspect of it, or has it always been celebratory for you?
For me, it's always been celebratory. I'm only 29, so I was born at the very kind of tail end of the Troubles when things were starting to get better. So I've never experienced that shame, but I do have a great aunt and uncle who live in Belfast, have done all their lives, and they grew up in 40s and 50s, and they said even then that sense of shame was still very much there. It was a sense of kind of that we'd failed in something that we had put so much effort into and so much love and care into, and there was just such a weight on the city.
Hmm. Yeah. The history, it's so interesting how, like, a lot of young people like yourself, like Titanic feels like it's just something in books. We feel disconnected from it, but like on this podcast, I get to talk to survivors, family members, and people who were directly connected to it, and we realize it wasn't that long ago, and she's still part of our lives, which is wonderful. And I feel like I just celebrate all the guests on this show that are doing work to continue to keep her legacy alive. Not, I say, and it's not a cliche. It's not like when I say her legacy is not just thriving, but growing. And it feels like Titanic's footprint gets bigger every day. And thanks to work like people like you are doing. Tell us about what brought you to the idea of writing. Was this your first book, The Death Ship? So what prompted this? What inspired you? What lit lit the flame?
It's a funny story because I had never intended for this to be a book.
Hmm.
So a couple of years ago, I went to a talk by another fantastic Titanic author called Mark Kernside. He was given a talk at the Public Records Office here in Northern Ireland, and just hearing him speak and how passionate he was about it, I left the talk, immediately contacted the head of the Belfast Titanic Society here, Ada McMichael, and I said, this is part of the story that I've always been interested in is what happened to the dead that were left behind. Would it be possible for me to do a bit of research and come back and present a talk? And to my shock, he immediately said yes. So I went into full panic mode and was like, oh no, I actually have to do this now. Yeah, it was a bit of a shock to the system. But yes, got all the information, got the talk sorted, got that delivered. I believe it was June 2022. And I had so much information left over that I couldn't fit into the talk. So I kind of thought, why don't I just write a book? There's not many authors out there who have talked about this part of the story. They've touched on it, but they haven't gone into the detail that I would have liked to have seen. So I believe there's a quote by Toni Morrison where she says, if there's a book out there that you want to read and it hasn't been written yet, you should be the one to write it. And that was very much my mantra the whole way through the writing process.
That's great. I have a book for artists that says, did all all fiction, everything you create is fan fiction because it's something you wish was out there in the world. So you're creating it. This, of course, is not fiction, but, and we talk about, that's a perfect segue. We talk about any authors that are thinking about writing books today, or any podcasters thinking about starting a podcast. It's kind of like you have to find your own angle into the Titanic world, because obviously so much is out there right now with it. It's not like there's a shortage. It's like, oh, there's no Titanic podcasts, I need to start one. So it's there's no shortage of books on the shelf as well. But I gotta tell you, I when I first found out about your book, I was just really excited about it, because I've said on my other podcast a bunch of times, the covepod, that one of my favorite classes that I took in college is called On Death and Dying, or it was called Death and Dying. And it taught college age students that death is a part of life. It feels like it's really far off or distant, but from the minute you're born, you're dying. Everybody experiences death. Every living thing will die. And it's something that had never really entered my mind growing up until, like, I'm a 20-year-old kid sitting in class. They're bringing in people on the verge of death with like 5 T cells left in their body, just to talk to us about what it's like to be actively dying. And so it really changed my life and made me cherish every day that from then forward. And I just took on this mantra: seize the day, take life by the horns, and create what you want to leave in the world. What is your relationship with death? And I can't wait to talk about this death positive movement in your bio.
So, to be honest, it's a little ironic considering what my book is about. Death terrifies me, but I try to take the same kind of mantra that you do, Paul, as in it could hit us at any day. The next day is not guaranteed, so just grab life by the horns and hold on, and just enjoy it while you're here. It's it's something that does frighten me, and I think a lot of people reading the book will feel the same. But I don't think that fear should hold you back from talking about it. I think that was the main goal with the book. It's more of yes, it's a Titanic book, but it's also a way to get people talking about death in a more general sense.
What is the death positive movement?
So I am fascinated by this movement. I unfortunately lost my Uncle Wayne 7 years ago. He was only 42, and it was very unexpected. It was while I was still at university, and I was trying to find a way to work through the grief of losing him. And I came across the work of mortician Caitlin Doty. She is the spearhead of the death positive movement. She is very open about what goes on in a mortician's day-to-day life, what death looks like in a practical sense, what it looks like in a philosophical sense, in a legal sense. And she was just very helpful in me getting through that process of being able to not only understand death, but feel comfy talking about it, even though I am scared.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
And for anybody who looks at the cover of your book, sees Titanic going down amongst the ice, and reads the title, The Death Ship, is Titanic the death ship, or is there another ship you're talking about?
See, that's the thing. The title works in two ways. I'm glad you picked up on that. Because the first recovery ship, as I'm sure we'll discuss later on, that went out to help retrieve the bodies, the Mackie Bennett, it was known as the Death Ship by the local papers at the time, but that title could be applied to any ship out there because there's always that risk that death could happen. You're not, like we said, you're not guaranteed.
Right. So tell, for anybody who is unfamiliar with the book, how do you pitch it to people? How do you tell people about it in the elevator?
I well, the way my dad, who's my unofficial public relations man, he always leads in with it's not your typical Titanic story. Like that was kind of how I pitched it to the publisher because, like you said, there's so many books out there. It's so difficult to find a new angle. Like everyone talks about the shipyard. They talk about how it was built. They talk about its journey, they talk about the sinking itself, and then they skip to the survivors and the aftermath. They always miss what happened to the dead. So that's kind of how I would bring my elevator pitch is it's the bit that no one talks about.
Mm. And so you mentioned you were compiling all the information for a talk, but as far as putting a book together, what was that experience like for you? What lessons did you have to learn right away that were maybe unexpected?
Um, the most unexpected one was actually crafting the facts in a way that was narratively interesting. I didn't want to just throw facts, figures, and stats at people. It had to be engaging. So learning how to do that was quite challenging, but it was very rewarding at the end because a lot of the feedback that I've got from readers so far has been that it's easy to read. And that was my fear when I was approaching the publisher was, are people going to be bored? But seems the contrary has happened, which is very nice.
Well, it's kind of that morbid interest too. It's like you're right. We don't talk about the bodies and what happened to. We'll talk about what happened to the lifeboats, what happened to the artifacts, what happened to the survivors, possessions, but what about the bodies? What is something that you think, what is something you learned in your research that probably like surprised you most and you think maybe most people haven't even considered or thought about?
One of the things that once you learn the fact, you kind of put two and two together and you go, oh, that makes sense. But one of the things that really stuck with me was there was like a hierarchical system of preserving the bodies. So the first class passengers that were brought on board, they were prioritized. They were the ones who got embalmed. They were the ones who were given the coffins. And then the lower down class wise you were, the
Yeah.
less you were prioritized. So say second class, third class, they would have been wrapped in canvas rather than put in a coffin. And then a lot of the crew would have been put just on ice as they were. So that was something that really shocked me.
I had no idea. That is fascinating. Wow. So even in death, you're prioritized by class.
Yeah.
And I've heard, through my casual fascination with the ship and my love of Titanic, a lot of bodies were given sea burials. How was that determined?
So partly it was to do with the condition of the body itself. So if it was beyond the point of embalming, if they decided as a group that it wasn't worth preserving the body because it was in such bad condition, that would have pushed you towards a sea burial. But again, there's the class issue of say you had a working class man from third class and a billionaire. They're going to embalm the billionaire because it's more likely that his family and friends are going to have the financial resources to send his body home or to come and get him. Whereas the third class, a lot of them were from the likes of Liverpool, Southampton, Belfast, lots of ones from France and Dublin and Cove. Like they wouldn't have had the resources to go and physically collect the body. So their logic was the sea may as well take them.
Mm, wow. You mentioned Halifax and Nova Scotia. Have you been there?
No, but I would absolutely love to go. A big part of the reason the book is as well written as it is because I had a lot of help from a fantastic lady called D. Ryan Meister. I cannot wait until she writes her own book because she is just a walking treasure trove of knowledge about this side of the story. She has lived in Halifax most, if not all, of her life, and she just knows this stuff off the top of her head. And she's invited me several times to go over, but unfortunately, it's a bit expensive if you're traveling from Belfast all the way over there. But I would love to go someday.
Can you explain to people like how the Mackie Bennett was dispatched? When we hear, the news first comes in, Titanic went down and there are a lot of bodies out there. How does the Mackie Bennett become the ship that is chosen to go recover?
So White Star Line had several representatives in New York and Halifax, and there were a few different boats that they could have picked, but they needed one that had an able-bodied crew, ones that knew the area, and the ship itself had to be able to get through the ice and be able to drift safely and not be damaged by the ice. And because the Mackie Bennett was a cable repair ship, they had like winches and like low down like ropes and things that would have helped them retrieve the bodies easier. Like you couldn't have just went out in a little rowboat, that wouldn't have worked. A ship even slightly bigger than the Mackie Bennett would have risked missing the bodies altogether because it's hard to see, to identify them in the water. Because that was one of the comments the crew made, was seeing the bodies was actually quite difficult because a lot of them would have been face down and you would have only saw the white of the life jacket. So it would be very easy to confuse that with ice. So there were several factors that went into picking the Mackie Bennett itself.
Were any bodies, and I'm sorry, I just received your book a few days ago and I cannot wait to dig in, but I'm sorry if this is a dumb question and something that you cover in the book, but bodies that didn't have life preservers, would they float? Were they recovered, or would they eventually sink or float away?
So I believe most of the bodies that were recovered did have life jackets on, unless they were, like several examples, they were clinging to a bit of wreckage or maybe a ring that was tossed during the sinking. But most of the victims that weren't wearing life jackets would have eventually sank. So, as I'm sure you know, your skin itself is the biggest organ in your body. But when you're in the water for that long, the water seeps into your pores and physically drags you down as you decompose. So a lot of them wouldn't have even been on the surface of the water. They would have just went straight down.
Because how long did it take timeline wise from when the ship went down and to when the Mackie Bennett got there?
I believe it was just over a week because the ship sank the 14th, and I
Mhm.
think the first ship went out maybe on the 17th or 18th. So it wasn't a massive gap, but when you take into account the icebergs itself, other ships passing by, and just general being out in the sea and all the different currents, it washed a lot of the bodies away. So by the time they got out there, even if they'd went the next day, it still would have been difficult to locate the bodies.
Hmm. Wow. And I'm sure as I read the description from the inside cover, you cover as well, like what would have happened to the bodies inside that were still inside the ship. We heard from an author, Angela Harris, who had her uncles through marriage were a la carte restaurant workers, and they were just like put in a room and told to stay there. And so you imagine how many people were in cabins, or you see in James Cameron's Titanic, people just laying in bed like, all right, well, this is it. The bodies that are down there, I think it's widely known that they would eventually dissolve, and that's why all we have left are the shoes. But um, in researching your book, what did you learn anything about the bodies inside the ship that you would like to share, that was you found to be interesting or surprising, without giving away, your book too much?
I was surprised that there was so much discourse about there being bodies in there at all. I know that James Cameron has specifically stated that he's been down to the ship over 30 times and he's never seen any actual evidence of bodies, whereas Robert Ballard, who discovered the wreck, he is pretty certain there's bodies in there somewhere, but it's difficult to know because when you look at the wreck as it is now, it is deteriorating and it's deteriorating fast. But as it deteriorates, there will be holes in the ship. So even if there are bodies, say, in the boiler room, it's very likely they wouldn't be the remains that we would think of them as. Like you said, it may be their clothes that have been left behind. So looking at all the discourse surrounding the arguments there was very interesting.
Wow, fascinating. And as this was your first book, what about the creative process is your biggest takeaway, would you say?
Um, keep notes of every single thing you do. So
Hmm.
as I'm sure many people listening to this, I have a lot of Titanic books, and some of them, it depends on your publisher, but some of them have very specific end notes and really succinct bibliographies, whereas others are a bit more free with it. When I was writing, I kept a note of all the sources that I used, but I did not write the page number down. So when I went to my publisher and they said yes, they told me that their process was to reference the page. So I then had to go back through the entire manuscript, pick out every fact, every quote, and then go back into the book I had got it from to get the page number. So that is one bit of advice I would give to any history writer is keep records of everything to save yourself time.
It's great advice. Yeah, I'm often like, where did I get that from? Where did I put that? Oh my goodness. I admire people that can stay organized because I'm often just like just following my heart's fire and not looking back. But I can imagine in writing a book, it pays off to be very well organized. What would you say to anyone out there who's considering writing a book, or whether it's about Titanic or anything, as far as the process of getting published these days, even what was that process like for you?
That process was actually surprising because like I've said in the book's bio, I've been writing my entire life and it's always been a dream of mine to be published. So I would try to keep up to date with publishing trends and advice from current authors to see what they've done. And a lot of the authors that I follow said getting published can take years. So sometimes it's good practice to go to somebody that you know you're not going to get published by, just so you can get experience in what the process is like. So when I started thinking of who I would like to publish my book, I started looking at the books that I own. And a lot of the books that I own were actually published by the History Press. So I thought, okay, I'll send my proposal to them, see how it's structured, see what kind of things they'll ask me. So when I actually go to get published, I'll know what to expect. But then once I sent the proposal off, they immediately said yes. So again, I went into full panic mode and was like, oh, okay. That's obviously a very rare example that won't necessarily happen to everybody, but I do think going to a couple of publishers that you know may not publish your book, getting that practice would be good. And any writers listening to this know that a big part of writing is rejection. So building up that resilience and knowing it's not personal, it may not necessarily reflect your writing. If someone says no, it may just be that particular topic isn't trending or that particular topic may not be marketable right now. So don't be discouraged if you are rejected. Just keep going and keep going because somebody out there will want to read your book. There's a for every writer, there's a reader.
Love that. And spread your wings, try new things, do scary stuff, take life by the horns, as we've been saying. You know, we're here once, death will eventually come. Don't be scared, just try it. I mean, be scared, but be excited, scared. And it's an interesting lesson to hear that, hear it from a publishing side or a writer's angle, but it is a lesson that is rings true throughout life, whether you're an actor in Hollywood or you're just trying to apply for a job somewhere. Sometimes you're just not, it's not a comment on your abilities or your skills or your talents. It's just maybe not a right fit. But swing for the fences, try for the publisher you want first and go from there. And, throughout, I say publisher, but I just mean it symbolically throughout life. Don't live your life in fear and not say what you want to say and leave your mark. Um, is there anything else that you're excited to share with people when you talk about your book that we haven't covered yet?
Um, do you know what? One of the bits that was interesting was, like I said at the start, this was never meant to be a book. It started off as a talk. But when I did my talk, I only covered the first two parts of the book. So I covered the lifeboats, the decomposition process, and the recovery process. But when I then went to get the book published, I thought I don't have enough words, like physically enough words to equate to a book. So I'm going to have to think of something else to write. And that's when I kind of got onto this idea about if there are bodies still down there, what does that mean for the wreck itself? It's not an empty vessel. And then I got into this whole idea of even if there aren't physically bodies there, like you've previously said, there's shoes, there's clear evidence of people that came to their final resting place there. So what does that mean for the wreck itself? Is it just an empty ship or is it a graveyard? And that brings in a lot of ethical considerations. There's cultural, philosophical, religious elements. Like it's not a simple answer. And that part of the book I thought was the most fascinating.
It is fascinating. It is something that a lot of people are talking about today, as far as, do we let the ship just become a coral reef down there, or do we bring up as much as we can? And all of the different thoughts and feelings, people are very passionate about what will become of the wreck that has been already down there for, what, 113 years. And these are conversations that continue to be had. I can't wait to get to that part of your book. I can't wait to read your book all the way through, but I'm excited for that part as well. And for anybody who wants to get their hands on it, where do you point them?
Um, for American readers, I would point to, honestly, Amazon's probably the best place. My publisher said that hardback copies won't be available in the US until spring 2026. So for most American readers, Kindle's probably the best option. You can still get it from Amazon and the History Press, but I think postage might be a bit more expensive because it would be coming from the UK. So just
I
to
will,
keep that in mind if you are curious.
I will attest, as an American, I did get mine on Amazon, and it is a hardcover, but it did take like 3 weeks to
Yeah.
arrive. Yeah. But so History Press website for anybody out there in the UK.
Yes. And
Very
you
good.
can pretty much get it in any bookstore at the minute. There's Waterstones, there's W.H. Smith, there's a random bookstore in France that seem to have it. I don't know why, but I'm grateful.
Awesome. What's next for you? Are you working on anything new?
I'm in the very early stages of researching a biography on Thomas Andrews. So, as listeners obviously know, Thomas Andrews was the designer of the ship, but he he lived in Cumber in Northern Ireland. That's half an hour away from me. Like his family mausoleum's there, his family archives are there. There's so much untouched documentation there, and other books have obviously touched on Thomas's life and his legacy, but there hasn't been a single dedicated biography to him since 1913. And that author obviously wouldn't have had access to the archives that I have access to. So that's definitely something that I would love to do because he was such a fascinating man, and he was a very kind man, which is something I think should be celebrated.
Is that the 1913 one you're referring to?
Shan Bullock, is it?
Yeah,
Yes.
Titanic Hero. I got this for Christmas actually, and I was thrilled to read it. But yeah, as I was reading it, I was like, how has nobody? This is wild because I was just thinking to myself, how has nobody written an updated bio of Thomas Andrews, who is just so many people's favorite character in the whole Titanic story. So wow, I'm excited. I'm excited for your new project and to eventually get my hands on that when it comes out. If I just this is a shameless plug or a shameless ask. If you get in touch with any family members while you're doing research for your book, I would love to have one on the show. I've been wanting to speak with somebody related to Mr. Andrews, and see what's going on as far as like their family legacy is good, how that's being shaped still by his heroic past. And that's very exciting. I'm excited for your next chapter, but I'm also excited to dive into the current chapter. What has been your experience with the promotional aspect of it? I know a lot of not just authors but creators are very much into the let me make the thing and then walk away from it. Oh, come on, I got to do these press conferences, these podcasts. Oh, what have you enjoyed the promotional process, or has that been kind of a pain in the butt?
I wouldn't say pain in the butt, but it was something I didn't consider when writing it. I forgot that marketing is a part of it. But genuinely though, it has been very enjoyable. Like I'm having loads of talks with new people that I've never met that are interested in the same things I am. I had a book launch about a month ago in a local Belfast store, and the store is literally about 30 feet away from the building where Thomas Andrews stayed when he was an apprentice at Harland and Wolff. So sitting there holding the book in my hands with all these people that were interested in reading it, knowing that he literally walked on the street that we were sitting on was absolutely, it was an unreal feeling.
That's amazing. And if anybody wants to keep up with you and all the updates on the book and your future books, where do you point them? Do you have a website, Instagram?
In the process of making a website, because again, marketing is something I need to I need to up the ante on. But if you're interested in following me, I am on Instagram. I'm at one_open book. You can usually find me through the History Press. They've got all my details linked in there. Anything that they publish to do with my book, they always tag me. So if you want to find me that way, you can.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been such a pleasure to meet and get to know you. Everybody out there, I want to say thank you for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, please feel free to follow the show, leave a positive review on your favorite podcast platform. And let's say thank you one more time to our guest, author Victoria Brown. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Her book, The Death Ship: Recovering the Bodies of Titanic's Dead, is out now. Pick it up at all the places you can, that we just discussed. And thank you once again for your time as we delved into today. We have one life, and time is the most valuable thing that we have. Thank you for sharing it with us. We acknowledge that it's a super special thing to be able to share this time with you, the airwaves with you out there listening, however you're listening, wherever you're listening. Thank you. And until the next episode, remember to seize the day, follow your heart's fire, and make each day count. See you, everybody.